In other words, don't with me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still 76 years old, and I can still beat the out of you.
When corrupt cops lose their composure on camera, the results can be shocking. Caught off guard by fearless interviewers, they reveal how far they'll go to defend their image or conceal the truth. So here are 10 explosive moments of corrupt cops flipping out at disrespectful interviewers.
Well, what would you do, Wayne, if some other guy moves in there and he's got the exact same personality as Vince, and he's verbally harassing you again? How do you think you would handle it? Would you do anything differently?
Well, usually I grab him by the neck and drag him out and get the out of him.
Okay.
It's a quiet Wednesday afternoon in Blaine, Washington, when chaos erupts at Maple Leaf Mobile Home Park. A man lay face down in his driveway, fatally shot, while his neighbor, 76-year-old Wayne Harold Mayer Sr., stood on his porch cradling a shotgun. Neighbors were left shocked as authorities rushed to the scene, uncovering probably the most twisted story you'll hear today. For years, tension between Mayer and his neighbor, 59-year-old Vincent Reams, had been simmering. Now, according to neighbors in prior complaints, Mayer believed Reams was intentionally harassing him, throwing rocks at his house, making noise, and issuing threats. However, many neighbors stated that they've never seen Reams act aggressively. In November 2022, Mayer filed a noise complaint against Reams, telling deputies he wished he could kill him. Authorities warned Mayer about making such threats, advising him to contact law enforcement for assistance. But despite that warning, Mayer continued to make threatening remarks, including a declaration the day before the shooting that he intended to kill Reams. The day prior to the fatal shooting, Mayer expressed frustration about his circumstances. He confided to a neighbor that he was upset over a rent increase and even threatened to shoot the landlord's girlfriend. During this conversation, Mayer also reiterated his intention to kill Reams, accusing him of ongoing harassment. So, at approximately 4 p.m. on October 4th, 2023, sheriff's deputies were called to the mobile home park following a report of a shooting. Neighbors had heard a gunshot and found Reams lying motionless outside his trailer. Mayer had returned to his home with the shotgun, where deputies later arrested him. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story gets interesting. When deputies arrived, Mayer was quick to mention that he was once a part of law enforcement.
What did you do in the Marine Corps?
Marine Corps?
Yeah, you said you're all Marines, your family.
Oh, my brother was a Marine.
Oh, okay.
I'm a B-52 bombers is what I did.
Oh, okay.
And according to his account, Reams had approached his porch, allegedly threatening to kill him, claiming self-defense. Mayer said he retrieved his unloaded shotgun, fetched a shell from his bedroom, loaded the weapon, and fired a single shot at Reams from a distance of 30 feet. However, court documents later reveal that Reams was unarmed and on his own property at the time. Now, during his interrogation, Mayer started off being cocky by trying to defend his action while claiming Reams deserved to be dead.
Right. This is who I am.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 76 years old, and I'm an ex-police officer. I'm a veteran of B-52 bombers. Mm-hmm. And that's who I am, and the whole family's like that. We all be there. Mm-hmm. And you've seen everything that he said over the time that he's done to us. And we had to put up with that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Mayer felt no remorse for what he did and didn't even try to hide it. In fact, he deviated from the topic a few times, making a joke about his wife.
Yeah, Sandy's on my case all the time.
Can I do this?
She's lovely.
How long you been married?
Huh?
How long you been married?
Oh, 26 years.
The detective, trying to be as respectful as possible, asked Mayer one more time what Reams did to him. But again, his reply was nothing but a whole bunch of rambling.
he was harassing, and he was going to go through all this stuff, and he's going to do something with my column and everything, and that was he was on the attack.
Okay.
I mean, that detective definitely deserves an award, considering how patient and stoic he is with Mayer. And just when he tried one more time to understand Mayer's claim of self-defense, Mayer did what he did best.
He comes over here.
Comes down his steps.
Yeah, he comes down, and he's yelling at me, and we're doing this, and we're doing that, and we're going this way, and we're going, and he's got his cat, and he's over there in my car,
Okay.
and he's just being a pain in the ass.
Okay.
And then he keeps going, and he keeps going, and he's attacking me about this, that, and another.
Okay.
And finally, seeing that the detective wasn't buying all the crap he was saying, Mayer entered full psycho mode.
Well, he attacked me.
Okay, but how? How do you
Come up
attack
my
yourself?
steps, and he comes
Right.
up, he comes at me.
He comes at you and does what?
He comes at me.
Okay, and does what?
Well, how about if I come at you?
Okay, well, I'm not going to shoot you.
In other words, don't with me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm still 76 years old, and I can still beat the out of you.
Yeah.
Superbad cop Nick Houck found himself deeply entangled in not one, but two chilling cases in Bardstown, Kentucky, a high-profile disappearance, and a shocking murder. But as crazy as that may sound, his interrogation was just as intense as the crimes he was being investigated for.
I mean, you're talking crazy.
Well,
I mean, you're talking crazy.
was that
You
your
said-
rehearsed response to what was going to happen today? Because it sure sounds like it.
I don't know what it sounds like. I'm just.
Well, I'm telling you what it is.
You're talking crazy.
July 3rd, 2015, Crystal Rogers and her boyfriend, Brooks Houck, went to Brooks's family's farm with their son. However, Brooks claims that by the time he woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone. 2 days later, on July 5th, Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, officially reported her daughter missing. That same day, her car was discovered abandoned near the 14-mile marker on the Bluegrass Parkway in Bardstown. Inside the vehicle, investigators found her keys still in the ignition, along with her phone and purse, but her body was nowhere to be found. Now, being the last person to see Crystal, her boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was subsequently charged with murder and was accused of intentionally, or under circumstances, showing extreme indifference to human life, causing the death of Crystal Rogers. But while Brooks was being investigated for her disappearance, his brother's name came into the picture. In October 2015, Nick Houck, a Bardstown City police officer and also the brother of Brooks Houck, was dismissed from his position due to allegations of interfering with the investigation into Crystal's disappearance. A report uncovered that Nick Houck contacted his brother Brooks during Brooks's interrogation by the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. In the call, Nick urged Brooks to protect himself and cautioned him that they might be trying to trip him up. Suspicion around Nick deepened when allegations surfaced that he had visited Brooks at the farm, where Brooks and Crystal were staying, just hours before Crystal was reported missing. But before his dismissal, Nick Houck raised serious doubts about his integrity as an officer when he failed a polygraph test, which included questions about whether he knew anything about Crystal's disappearance. I mean, failing that test meant he was lying about something, and when interrogated by a detective, Nick tried flipping the script, making things look even more suspicious.
That's what I'm doing to you. I'm telling you the truth.
No, you're not. We're past that. I've already shown you.
I've taken the polygraph. Do you have anything else for me? Because I'm not going to sit here and we're not going to go back and forth like this.
The detective tried to further make Nick understand that if he was truly telling the truth, he wouldn't have failed that test. But again, Nick made it seem like he was telling the truth, and even attempted to gaslight the detective.
I don't know nothing about this. Nothing at all, and I had nothing to do with it. I don't know anything.
Well,
If I had something to tell you, I would she's got kids.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
Why do you think we're here?
Okay, look, I don't know nothing. Dude, I don't give a goddamn what your fucking computer said. Because you're calling me a fucking liar.
No,
That's
I'm just
why.
calling you a liar. I'm
Okay?
not cussed you.
I don't like it when people call me a liar.
In a second interview, Nick denied ever saying anything implicative to his brother, despite his brother admitting to it a few weeks prior.
And you haven't talked to your brother about this case?
I had very little to nothing.
So I mean, how did the conversation go when he said he called you and said, "I'm on my way up here to the PD to be interviewed"?
I can't remember how he stated it. He just said they were going to interview him. And that may have been like his second interview.
Did he seem nervous? Was he scared? Was he asking for advice? Was he confiding in you? Like, what was he?
Brooks, the same old Brooks.
I mean, if you don't talk that much generally, and your brother calls you, there's got to be some reason he's calling you.
Yeah, I mean, he calls me from time to time. It's not like we just completely ignore one another, but we don't just hang out all the time.
And of course, he claimed not to remember why he went to see his brother on their farm when Crystal was there, and also claimed not to remember a single thing he and his brother must have talked about.
That he did everything that we talked about, everything that
Sometimes I can't remember what happened 2 days ago, you know. I'm being 100% honest with you.
And I understand that, but being a police officer, we kind of have to remember things.
If you didn't write it down, if you didn't, remember it, it didn't happen, right?
Well, but I write everything down. If you look at my notes, I mean, it's all written down. I've got it. When I go testify in court, I've got the report right in front of me, you know.
Nick was accused of dishonesty, withholding crucial details in an investigation, unethical behavior, insubordination, and official misconduct, though none of these charges were ever formally brought against him. And what's even more troubling is that less than 18 months after Crystal's disappearance, her father was shot and killed while hunting with his grandson on their family property in Nelson County. During the investigation into his murder, it was discovered that Nick Houck had sold a rifle under a fake identity. The rifle turned out to be the same caliber as the one used in Mr. Ballard's death and matched 4 out of the 5 criteria being investigated. To this day, neither Nick nor his brother have been charged in connection with Crystal's disappearance or Ballard's death, and Crystal's body remains missing. August 3rd, 2022, South Carolina Highway Patrol Trooper Corporal Matthew Nix was suspended after an alleged violation of department policy. Now, it all went down on July 29th, 2021, when one man named John Holliday drove down Pearson Road and ended up right in the middle of a South Carolina Highway Patrol roadblock. The first officer he encountered was Corporal Cam Welsh. Welsh immediately noticed the smell of alcohol and marijuana on Holliday and ordered him to step out of his vehicle. Trooper Will Baker then escorted Holliday to the front of his patrol car, which had a dash camera recording. "How much have you had to drink?" Baker asked. Holliday responded, "Half of that cup," as the camera captured Baker placing a red plastic cup on the patrol car's hood. Welsh, a seasoned officer known for his DUI expertise, directed Baker to conduct field sobriety tests on Holliday. Welsh had earned the title of Trooper of the Year for DUI arrests in 2015 and was named Trooper of the Year again in 2019. While the video doesn't capture it, Welsh gets into Holliday's car to move it off the road. Afterward, Baker began the sobriety tests. But soon, Welsh radioed something that abruptly ended the process. Welsh later revealed that he had discovered a bag of marijuana edibles in the front seat and 2 bags of cash in the back. The video footage showed Baker patting Holliday down by the front of the patrol car. Trooper Baker then drove Holliday away from the scene to jail, charging him with a DUI. While Baker was gone, Welsh and another officer stayed behind to continue processing Holliday's vehicle. Welsh reported that he found a total of 3 bags of cash, 2 in the car and 1 more inside the center console. He secured the bags in his patrol car and headed back to the Sumter office of Troop 1. Once at the office, Welsh activated his in-car camera, ensuring a recording of the trip while handling the evidence. He arrived before anyone else and later told investigators that he took the cash from his patrol car and carried it inside. However, he only brought 2 of the 3 bags inside with him. Corporal Matthew Nix, an evidence technician, arrived at the office later that night. Now, he was responsible for transporting the cash to the Patrol Center Evidence Facility in Columbia and verifying the amounts. After the troopers sorted and stacked the bills for efficient counting, they created a tally sheet showing 4,899 bills, which had to be individually accounted for. The patrol's policy required required 2 separate counts, one by the troopers and another by Nix, and the totals had to match before the money could be sealed in evidence bags. But something went wrong. After several hours of counting, Nick and Welsh confirmed that there were 4,899 bills, totaling $110,482. Nix then took the money to the Central Evidence Facility and placed it in a secure safe. On August 3rd, a patrolman from the Forfeiture Division takes the money to the bank for a final count and to have a cashier's check issued to the federal government. However, after using automated machines, the bank found a $3,140 discrepancy between the patrol's tally and the actual amount. That same day, Nix was called into his captain's office, where the process to launch a criminal investigation began.
Were the bags sealed, the evidence bags,
Yes.
were they sealed?
Yes. I signed the bag and dated it, but I did not sign the seal. Again, I signed it's always 2020.
It's all right, so you signed actually on the front of the bag or the back of the
On
bag?
the front of the bag with a date.
Now, during his interrogation, Nix tried feigning oblivion to what had happened to the missing cash and why there was a discrepancy in the figures.
I told him that it was off $157 $20 bills.
And what did he say?
It's pretty much the same thing I said. What?
Yeah.
For the rest of that interrogation, Nix kept trying to defend himself while both Corporal Welsh and Corporal Nix were suspended without pay. And this internal investigation was initiated into the missing money, as well as Welsh's late submission of an evidence bag containing cash 4 days after it was seized. Although they weren't formally charged with anything, their suspicion has gotten indefinite. April 14th, 2016, in Griffin, Georgia, Officer Matthew Boynton radioed for help after hearing 2 gunshots from inside his home. When police arrived, they found his wife, Jessica Boynton, lying in a locked closet with a gunshot wound to her head. Beneath her body was Matthew's service weapon. At first glance, it seemed like a tragic suicide, but nearly a month later, Jessica miraculously regained consciousness and claimed to actually have been shot by her husband Matthew. But how true were these claims? Jessica Lester first met Matthew Boynton in high school, a relationship encouraged by her friends. They persuaded her to give him a chance, saying,
"If you don't like him, you can always break up."
Matthew was an 11th grader, the grandson of Spalding County Sheriff, and popular amongst the cheerleaders and football players. With his baby face yet muscular build, he was often seen in Ralph Lauren boots and Hollister shirts. Jessica, a sophomore, was less popular, but despite their differences, the two began dating. Now, by the spring of 2013, Jess and Matt had been dating for a year. And at just 16 years old, Jessica goes to her grandparents, who had raised her since childhood, and tells them she's pregnant with Boynton's child. Apologizing for the unexpected news, she explains her plans to settle down with Matthew, who was practically her first ever boyfriend. Now, Jessica's grandparents were prepared to help raise the child. However, Jessica and Matthew decided to move into a home near Matthew's grandparents, just across the street from Sheriff Wendell Beam. Jessica had become a dedicated mother, always on the edge about potential dangers her child might face, yet she struggled with isolation. She finished high school online, rarely seeing her friends and family. On the other hand, Matthew's behavior didn't really help either. He frequently dismissed her connections to her loved ones, insisting that they weren't real family because they weren't blood relatives. In December 2014, Jessica had an affair and became pregnant again. Now, some in her family believe this was her escaping her relationship with Matthew that had really become toxic. Now, surprisingly, Matthew chose to stay and raise the child as his own. They even decided to marry, though Jessica admitted there was no real proposal, just a sense of obligation to keep moving forward. Now, Jessica's personality began to change. Her grandmother noticed she seemed crushed under the weight of the relationship, while Matthew's controlling behavior worsened. In April 2016, Jessica had planned to leave Matthew. She had packed her belongings and intended to move into her sister Dusty's house with her 2 sons. But the night before she was set to leave, Jessica and Matthew went to Walmart to buy formula for the baby. They argued, and Jessica refused to get into the car. A Griffin police lieutenant advised Matthew not to force her into the vehicle. Their neighbor, Megan Browning, later heard 2 gunshots coming from their home and saw Matthew walking briskly to his truck. Moments later, Matthew met a fellow officer at a Waffle House, claiming he had received a suicide text from Jessica. Inside the house, officers find Jessica in a locked closet, bleeding from a gunshot wound to the head. Beneath her was Matthew's service weapon. Suspicion loomed over Matthew, as he had been exchanging flirty text messages with his girlfriend moments before reporting the shots. But more on that later. Jessica was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were stunned to discover that neither bullet had penetrated her skull, despite a fractured head. Placed in a medically induced coma, she began an extraordinary recovery. Hospital staff dubbed her the Miracle Child, as she defied all odds and regained consciousness within weeks. Months after the shooting, Jessica accuses Matthew of withholding a gym bag full of her belongings, which she had packed to leave him. Matthew denied that claim, but his then-girlfriend tipped police off, revealing that he indeed still had the bag. When confronted, Matthew denied having any of Jessica's belongings, revealing his lies and further discrediting his earlier claims about the night of the shooting. Subsequently, Matthew Boynton was interrogated after the discovery of Jessica's bag, which included her clothes, underwear, and a dental retainer. At the beginning of this interview, though, Matthew denied having any of Jessica's belongings. At this point, he had no idea that his girlfriend had dropped it off at the police station.
Do you know anything about where her clothes or retainer may have been?
Like I told her before, the only thing that we might have had would have been in that white trailer, and my stepdad has not mentioned anything else being in there.
The officers went further to ask if he mistakenly took that bag along while moving out of his former home, but again, he denied doing so.
Through the course of that move, did you find anything that belonged to her at that point?
No, because if I would have, I would have turned it over to her, because I have no need to keep her stuff.
The detectives then confront them with the evidence of the bag in their possession, yet Matthew stuck defiantly with his ridiculous story of knowing nothing about it.
When y'all were in the process of moving, and you moved into the house that you're at now, your residence, did you not see this bag?
Yes, sir, it was in my storage room in the garage.
All right. Now, why would I be holding a picture of this bag?
I guess because Jessica brought it into you.
Why would Jessica have it if you had it at your house?
I don't know. I guess somebody got it from my garage or my shed.
Who would have gotten
it? There's a couple of people.
Since Matthew was an officer, and his grandfather had such a solid reputation, this case was difficult to deal, but eventually those detectives had to break the news to him, informing Matthew about what was truly going on.
The bag was turned into us. We have possession of the bag.
Yes, sir.
We have evidence that says it came out of your storage room. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
After seeing the overwhelming evidence against him, both detectives left Matthew alone for a few minutes. And when they got back into that office, Matthew had made a full confession.
I know I didn't. I should have turned it in. But not only because I'm a cop, because I should have, because it was Jessica. Even if she let me use it.
It was the right thing to do, man.
I don't know what I was thinking then. I don't know if it's because I was scared. I mean, I told you, I come to work every day scared. There's no excuse. I'm not trying to make one for myself.
You could argue that Matthew didn't lose his temper during this interrogation, nor were the detectives being disrespectful. But it's shocking how blatantly he denied having Jessica's bag in his possession. And what's even more astonishing is that he walked away from this case scot-free. Yeah, you heard that right. Matthew was allowed to go free, despite all the evidence that could have made Jessica a victim of attempted murder being dismissed by the court. Now, this dismissal might have been influenced by the judge presiding over the case, who was friends with Boynton's grandfather, the sheriff. And to make matters worse, Jessica's sons were taken away from her, and she was only allowed to see them 4 times a week. As strange as all this is, Matthew was charged with making false statements and violating his oath of office. However, he was never indicted and was even hired as a reserve officer in another city.
We begin with breaking news we are following right now tonight at 11. We have been getting more details all night long about a now former officer charged in the death of a Gwinnett County teen.
On July 26, 2022, Susana Morales disappeared while walking home from a friend's house in Norcross, Georgia. Now that night she sent her mother a text around 9:40 p.m. and surveillance shows her heading in the direction of her home, according to authorities at the time. However, she never arrived. Months later, on February 6, 2023, around 6:30 p.m., Gwinnett police were called to Highway 316 between Drowning Creek and the Barrow County line after a passerby reported spotting what appeared to be human remains in the woods. Detective CSI and the Gwinnett Medical Examiner's Office arrived at the scene, and the remains were taken into custody for further investigation. Testing later confirmed that the remains belonged to Susana Morales. Her body had been discarded in the woods along the route she was last seen. Near her remains, authorities discovered a personal handgun belonging to 22-year-old Miles Bryant, a former officer with the Doraville Police Department. Although Bryant had previously reported the gun as stolen, investigators traced it back to him. Additionally, cell phone data placed Bryant both near the location where Susana was last seen and in the wooded area where her body was eventually found, leading to his arrest. Now, during his interrogation, Bryant tried to get familiar with those officers, since they were all cops working in the same county.
I don't know where. I feel like I met you. I don't know where. I talk to a lot of Gwinnett officers. Yeah. Like QTs, I love talking to Gwinnett officers.
Well, when I was on the road, I was at the QT getting that drink.
That's a guarantee you can find officers a big trip.
But after minutes of being a phony and trying to avoid any question regarding where he was, the night of Susana's disappearance, both officers left the room, and only one came back with a lady who had a laptop packed with surveillance footage. That female officer showed Bryant that his vehicle was seen around the scene of Susana's disappearance. And his expression? You know what? Just have a look for yourself.
So it's a kind of a video, but it looks like there's a black truck over here, and I know that you patrol in your truck. So, but it's like right there by the exit. So I was like, oh, maybe that's him. But if you were talking,
right there?
Yeah.
No, that's not me.
Okay.
Yeah, I never went to what is that, the gas station?
I don't even know what it is. The family got it.
Oh, yeah, no.
If you listen closely, there was a change in Bryant's tone, which usually signifies different things during an interrogation, but in this case, it was clearly a sign of nervousness and discomfort. Keep in mind that at this point, Bryant had no clue that his gun had been found at the scene of Susana's lifeless remains. However, when that female officer finally broke the news to him, he retracted his statements, claiming to have visited that area, filed a report for nothing, and saw Susana that night.
Yeah, it wasn't overtime. It was a late report that needed to be done.
Okay, so you just went to a parking lot driving around and then doing reports?
Yeah.
Okay.
Driving around. From what I've seen, she lived nearby.
Like where?
I have no clue. They said she was walking home, and I don't know. They said she was nearby. So I guess it'd be in the area.
At that point, it was clear Bryant's story wasn't making any sense, really, and he immediately kicked into defense mode.
We got your phone in the woods 3 hours after. Why were you in the woods?
I wasn't in the woods.
You were in the woods.
I was not in the woods.
You were.
Phone pings are very precise.
Do you understand how they work? So one, we got very lucky because there's a tower right there where her body is. So we can get precise locations. It costs a little bit more, but we can get precise locations. Your phone is right there where your gun was dropped. You were in the woods. It's not a question of if you were, if you weren't. You were. You were in the woods. Is it possible you zoned out?
His cell phone was pinged to the location where Susana was murdered. His gun was found at that location. He called Susana's sister to find out what they knew. He lives near that area where she went missing. And there's video evidence showing he was at that vicinity the night of Susana's death. I mean, how much more evidence do you need? But Bryant kept denying everything.
You can say no, I don't hear that word from you no more. You just keep going on and on and on. And the stuff you're saying, I don't respect you as a cop. Okay, I don't respect you as a person anymore because the shit you're saying is crazy and it makes zero sense. Okay, you may say no all you want, but everything lines up with you doing this. You don't care if anybody finds your gun. You know why? Because it's next to a dead body.
He was charged with first-degree murder and a host of other felonies. And during the trial, prosecutors presented evidence of Bryant's suspicious internet searches, including queries like, how long does it take a body to decompose? And how are you identified by dental records? So after a week-long trial, a Gwinnett County jury convicted Bryant, now 23, of malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, and filing a false crime report. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 22 months. Now, corrupt cops don't always lose their cool with interviewers. Sometimes they turn on fellow officers during interviews. One striking case is Wasatch County Sheriff Jared Rigby, who was caught trying to intimidate a fellow cop into covering up his friend's misconduct. On March 21st, 2021, Heber County Police Chief Dave Booth was on the scene when officers respond to reports of a drunken man near 1000 South 400 West in Heber City, Utah. When cops got to the residence, they encountered Jesse James Rodriguez, who was reportedly intoxicated, combative, and even tried grabbing one officer's weapon. Body cam footage later obtained by Fox 13 News captured the tense encounter as Rodriguez threatened and struggled with the officers. Paramedics were eventually called in after they restrained and handcuffed Rodriguez. Chief Booth then took a hold of Rodriguez by his shirt, guiding him toward the patrol car with another officer's help. Up to that point, everything seemed to follow protocol, according to the officers present. But what happened next crossed a serious line. Booth was seen repeatedly gripping Rodriguez's throat as he struggled to get him into the backseat of the police car. An officer on duty that day, Lucas McTaggart, witnessed the troubling behavior and made a bold decision. He reported that incident to his supervisor, a risky move considering the allegations were against the police chief himself. Unfortunately, things only spiraled downward from there. The case was investigated by then Wasatch County Sheriff Jared Rigby, and while Rigby worked for a different agency, reports suggested he was friends with Booth, posing a clear conflict of interest and raising serious concerns about Rigby's ability to conduct an impartial investigation.
If we were concerned about your ability to tell the truth, or we questioned any of those things, then we would also consider giving Garrity. We're not in that boat. So you're not in trouble.
Rigby starting the interview by telling Lucas he won't be in trouble seemed just odd, since Lucas was trying to report a situation and wasn't even the subject of that investigation. Rigby tried flipping everything on Lucas when he asked what exactly Lucas was there to complain about.
So what were the concerns that you raised?
That I observed an officer use excessive force.
You're seeing excessive use of force. That's not your decision. That is a determination that the department will make. Sure.
These words made it seem like Officer Lucas didn't know what he was talking about, a tactic by Rigby to intimidate him with his position as sheriff. However, Lucas, who clearly knew this was against policy, stood his ground on the matter.
We've just been told chokeholds are against policy, and all, George Floyd and everything else, and people going to prison and all of this stuff. And then we see that happen, and that was very clear to me that that was inappropriate.
And then Sheriff Rigby tried bullying Lucas into believing he had made a grave mistake by reporting the matter to his supervisors. Now, honestly, if it were any other cop, maybe they would have backed down and dropped the case. But Lucas, a veteran in that county, wasn't willing to let Booth's actions get swept under the rug, given that he knew it was against policy. As a matter of fact, he went further, accusing Sheriff Rigby of trying to cover up for his friend.
I guess questions on where that's coming from, because I feel like you're obviously already prepared with that information you just gave me, right?
What's that?
That whole speech just barely that you just gave me about how I handled it and that my department thinks it's wrong. I mean, I'm assuming that sounds like it was something that came from you before the conversation that we just had.
No.
In the end, Lucas's concerns were proven to be valid, and Police Chief Booth was suspended for a month. even though his suspension was never officially linked to this case. As for Sheriff Rigby, a look into his internal affairs report reveals a troubling detail. He didn't interview any witnesses during the use of force investigation until after he had already cleared Chief Booth of any wrongdoing. As such, his swearing in as the director of Peace Officer Standards and Training in Utah was suspended. The crimes of James Hansey might not seem as shocking compared to others in this video, but it's his reaction during his interrogation that really rocks the boat. On May 8, 2018, Hansey was fired from his role as Buckeye Lake Police Chief for several reasons. Chief among them was his unauthorized use of police data. Now, prosecutors accused him of running unauthorized background checks on non-police department employees, a clear violation of Ohio Law Enforcement Gateway, or OLEG, regulations. And here's where it gets even messier. Hansey allegedly provided confidential information from those checks to employers. And if that wasn't enough, he was embroiled in a bitter feud with Mayor Peggy Wells. Now, the mayor had pushed for his removal following allegations that he'd falsified employee time cards. So during his interrogation, Hansey initially focused on explaining the background check scandal, adamantly trying to defend his actions, but the investigators had much deeper concerns to address. Flashback to March 10, 2018. While off duty, Hansey responded to a police call at a private residence. During that incident, he accidentally discharged his firearm into the ground. Complicating matters, Mayor Wells had explicitly instructed him to remain off duty after undergoing an amputation of a finger on his dominant hand. Now, when questioned about why he disregarded the mayor's orders, Hansey offered this explanation.
No, I had the doctor's excuse with me.
I've got the doctor's excuse. It doesn't say that you can return until the 12th, and this incident happened on the 10th.
Now, obviously, this wasn't a major problem since no one was killed or harmed, but the fact that Hansey kept trying to defend himself just made things worse.
But I considered myself on duty because I'm in the village. I live in the village. I'm the chief of police, so I'm 24/7. So yeah, I considered myself on duty.
Okay, so if one of your officers acted the same way you did, in the same manner, you wouldn't have a problem with that then at all?
It was clear Hansey was in the wrong, yet he tried to play the good cop card, likely relying on his position as police chief to shield him, thinking he was untouchable. But that wouldn't stop the law from catching up with him. Hansey was arrested and charged with 2 counts of unauthorized use of property, both 5th-degree felonies. Among the allegations was the improper disposal of evidence, specifically tossing drug paraphernalia into a dumpster instead of having it properly destroyed. And after being dismissed as police chief, Hansey attended a village council meeting where things went from bad to worse. He unleashed a string of profanity-laden remarks at council members and Mayor Peggy Wells, eventually needing to be escorted out. Some argue his behavior was the result of job-related stress, but that doesn't excuse running a police department without following the rules. Despite everything, Hansey managed to avoid jail time. Instead, he was enrolled in a diversion program, a form of pre-trial sentencing that lets offenders avoid a conviction if they meet certain conditions. Talk about luck, right? On July 24th, 2020, Jalen Fleer, a San Diego County Sheriff's deputy, was hit with 27 offense charges involving 4 victims. The case sent shockwaves across the nation, not because of those crimes, but because of the audacity with which he carried them out. Fleer used Snapchat as a weapon of choice, a platform predators often exploit because messages and media can disappear within 24 hours, or even sooner, depending on the settings. During a 2-week span in March and April 2020, Fleer contacted dozens of female victims, using the app to solicit sexual encounters. His role as a law enforcement officer made his actions even more chilling. Jalen thought he found the perfect loophole. No evidence, no case. He was careful to ensure his victims couldn't take screenshots or record their conversations, confident that without proof, he could dodge any investigation. Adding to that arrogance, he believed his badge would protect him from scrutiny. But here's the thing, Snapchat isn't as foolproof as he thought. Messages may disappear for users, but in investigations, authorities can override encryption to recover those records. When investigators got their hands on Fleer's messages, what they found was deeply disturbing. Fleer used explicit sexual language, sending photos of his erect genitalia, and even offered money for sexual favors. He would introduce himself as a deputy and send photos in uniform, as if that somehow made his actions acceptable or less threatening. One brave victim stepped forward and told her story. She said that Fleer once picked her up from home, drove her to a parking lot, and forced her to perform oral sex for $100. If that wasn't bad enough, the girl's parents found out what was going on when Fleer messaged her again, this time trying to convince her to bring a friend for a threesome. And that's when they stepped in and reported him to the authorities. When Fleer was interrogated, the detectives played it cool at first, starting with casual small talk to ease his nerves. But as the evidence piled up, his confidence unraveled, exposing the chilling reality of a predator who thought he was untouchable.
And have you always worked corrections?
Yeah, I attempted to go out to patrol, went to the academy. Things didn't work out there, so I came back here.
Did you have fun at the academy while you were there?
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. It's good. I mean, camaraderie and stuff like that. So.
But when the detective talked about Snapchat, Fleer knew something was up.
I was back in. I stopped. Everything got cut off. Got rid of. I mean, I didn't delete the Snapchat. I just deleted the app. So.
Okay.
But I haven't used it for like, I don't know, a year and a half now.
Now listen closely to this. Despite knowing the detective was trying to probe him for his depraved actions, Fleer, out of bravery or stupidity, sat there and allowed the accusations to wash over him without leaving any reaction. As an officer of the law, he should have been outraged when presented with such grave accusations, but his demeanor said otherwise. And when it seemed like he was being shoved into the corner of guilt, Fleer had to shut down the interrogation by saying this.
Do you have any other questions? I mean, can we still ask you questions, or do you want to stop?
No, I want to wait because I'm uncomfortable with this, so I'm going to talk to the lawyer.
Okay.
Fleer was subsequently relieved of his duties and arrested on charges of sexual misconduct. June 18, 2021, Fleer was found guilty by a jury and sentenced to 12 years in prison, a sentence many say didn't equate to the decadence of his crimes.
You're fine. I'm just trying to get up sure what happened or what's going on. Okay. But I just have to invoke my right. Okay.
The story of Grant Hardin, a former police chief, unfolds in 3 chilling parts. The cold-blooded murder he committed, his reprehensible acts of pedophilia, and the unsettling behavior he displayed during his interrogation. It all began on February 23, 2017. James Appleton, a 59-year-old resident of Gateway, Arkansas, had parked his truck by the roadside to take a phone call. And as he exchanged pleasantries with a passing stranger, the unthinkable happened. Gunshots rang out, leaving Appleton dead. In a small town of just 400 residents and only a handful of businesses, identifying the suspect didn't take long. As passerby recognized the vehicle fleeing the scene, it belonged to none other than Grant Hardin. Now, Hardin wasn't just any resident. He was a former law enforcement officer with an impressive resume. He'd served as a constable in Benton County, a police officer in Fayetteville and Huntsville, and most notably, the police chief of Gateway, where he lived with his family. Known for making the community feel secure, Hardin seemed the epitome of trustworthiness. But behind that facade lurked a far darker reality. He was a murderer and a pedophile. Appleton's death shattered the image Hardin had carefully maintained, exposing the monster beneath. After being identified as the prime suspect, Hardin was brought in for questioning. Using his extensive knowledge of police tactics, he tried to outwit detectives, playing psychological games in a desperate attempt to manipulate the investigation.
I'm going to sleep good tonight regardless of whether you want to talk to me and tell me what happened or not. I don't think you will. Honestly, I don't think you will.
Hardin refused to confess, invoking his right to remain silent and requesting a lawyer. Still, it was clear to him and to the authorities that his luck had run out. At one point, he even tried to escape through the back door, only to find it locked. Adding to his problems, Hardin's wife admitted that he was out at the time Appleton was killed, leaving him with no alibi. He was promptly arrested. While authorities knew that they had a dangerous man in custody, they had no idea just how dangerous he truly was. When Hardin's DNA was entered into the system. It matched evidence from a cold case involving the sexual assault of an elementary school teacher, Amy Harrison. In 1997, Amy was attacked as she prepared for a Sunday church service in a cafeteria. During the assault, the attacker's DNA was transferred onto her clothing, and the evidence had been sitting in the database for over 2 decades. Now it had a match: Hardin. In 2019, Hardin finally pled guilty to the rape case, but refused to explain his motive. Taking a plea deal for both crimes, he was given 35 years in prison. Today, he's serving his time with medium security.
I mean,
Well,
because I know how this stuff works, okay? Don't get me wrong, you're right, I have been doing this a long time. And now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me.
No.
Now I got that sense.
February 24th, 1986. Sherry Rasmussen was found dead in her Van Nuys, California apartment where she lived with her husband, John Rutan. She had been brutally beaten and shot 3 times during a violent struggle. At first, LAPD had classified the case as a botched burglary, unable to identify a suspect. But Sherry's father had a strong hunch. He pointed to LAPD officer Stephanie Lazarus, who'd once been in a relationship with John. In the end, his suspicions were right. Lazarus was the killer. Our story traces back to 1978 when John Rutan, then an 18-year-old freshman at UCLA, first met Stephanie Lazarus. John was attractive and well-liked, but he only had eyes for Stephanie. The two grew close and started seeing each other, though John never considered Stephanie his girlfriend, describing their relationship as peculiar. Stephanie, however, had deeper feelings and became increasingly obsessed with John. Her behavior was pretty bizarre. She would steal his clothes while he was in the shower and then take nude photographs of him while he slept. So after college, they drifted apart. But Stephanie's obsession only grew stronger. By 1984, John had moved on and fallen in love with Sherry Rasmussen, a bright and accomplished woman. Their connection was instant, and within months, they were engaged. They married in November 1985. But Stephanie didn't take the news well. Enraged, she begged John to call off the wedding and even went as far as to threaten Sherry at her home. Despite Sherry's fear, though, John reassured her that they were safe, and the couple tied the knot. Tragically, this marked the countdown to Sherry's untimely death. On February 24th, 1986, John gets home from work to find his garage door open and shattered glass on the driveway. Alarmed, he rushes inside and discovers Sherry's lifeless body on the living room floor. Her face was bruised and swollen, and blood was everywhere. Initially, the investigation stalled as police ruled out several suspects, but Sherry's father insisted that Stephanie's threats couldn't be ignored. This led investigators to take a closer look at her. Eventually, DNA evidence from the crime scene pointed directly to Stephanie Lazarus. But as an experienced LAPD officer, she knew exactly how investigations worked and could easily manipulate the process. Knowing this, detectives had tread carefully. Instead of confronting her outright, they brought her in for questioning under the guise of a routine inquiry, ensuring she wouldn't suspect she was the primary target.
You know how up there people can see what's going on if you go into an interview room or people are in there getting supplies?
Okay.
So we wanted to afford you some privacy, some confidentiality.
Okay.
Next, she was asked about the nature of her relationship with John.
Were you guys still friends or kind of,
I mean,
Is it friendly, not friendly?
no, I don't think it was not friendly. I mean, we were friendly. I know that.
But judging by her attitude, she seemed unsettled by their questions. And if anyone was ever doubting her innocence, what she said next changed everything.
So I've got photos of, his brother, his sister, of
10,000
him.
pictures?
Oh, yeah.
How long did that take them?
Months.
At that moment, the detectives knew there was more to her story. Unfortunately for them, Stephanie picked up on their tricks and immediately retracted from answering more questions.
If you're doing this as an interrogation, you're saying, hey, I'm a suspect. Well, now I got a problem with, now you're accusing me of this? Is that what you're saying?
We're trying to figure out what happened, Stephanie.
Well, I'm just saying.
June 5th, 2009. Stephanie was arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of the events that unfolded. They argued that on the day of the incident, Stephanie stalked John's home, waiting for the moment he left for work. Once he was gone, she allegedly picked the lock to the living room, entered the house, and brutally attacked Sherry, beating her severely before shooting her 3 times. The jury found Stephanie guilty, and she was sentenced to 27 years in prison.